This is Visions Under Construction, a chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on. For their continued support, we would like to thank Simwood, straight-talking, forward-thinking telecoms. Simwood.com. Why not make CloudOnyx your communication partner? Go to cloudonyx.io. You can find everything about the VUC at vuc.me, thanks to Bluehost, and thanks also to zipdx.com, the conference bridge, and to voxphone.com for local rate dial-ins.
And our guest today is Giles, who was running the, I met him in the pub up in Surrey. He's running the whole ComCon UK video thing, and they got the recordings up really quickly. Anyway, welcome, Giles. We're going to talk a lot about different things, but welcome and glad to have you.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you for having me on your show. It's great to be here.
Giles, normally we like to get people talking about how they got into all this stuff, but I think it's appropriate for Michael Graves to tell us how we all met you, because he's responsible for this and he needs to take responsibility. And he could also explain the story of how the ComCon thing came together. And then after that, we'll go back into your history. Go, Michael.
Okay, very simple. I'm a frustrated former Wirecast user. And Randy's familiar with Wirecast. He's used that software. It's a streaming, an early leader in video streaming production software. And a couple of years ago, in my frustration, I found a piece of software called vMix and have been using that instead and have not looked back. And in engaging in the vMix user community and a whole bunch of people who are sort of in that space, I come across, amongst other things, Giles's World of Live Streaming, which I have watched on many an occasion, and also Tom. Oh, his last name is eluding me, but Sinclair. Thank you, Tom, who seems to be have a certain amount of glue and acts as a certain binder agent for that community. And basically, what I've discovered is that entire live streaming video community is a parallel to what we have been doing for a decade, except that we all hail from a telecom background and our experience is voice and video conferencing, and you all come from a slightly different background, and which is a perfect segue to what we really want, where we really want to begin, which is back in the beginning, and how you got your earliest start in technology. First toys, first computers. How did you get the bug?
Right. Well, that goes back to sort of the early 80s. There was a company called Sinclair Research, produced a computer called the ZX80. And I had one of those I bought for a tenner because I was thinking, I wanted to find out about these computer things. I want to know what it's all about. And I progressed to a ZX81 and went through the progression of the Sinclair machines and BBC micros and stuff like that. Eventually into PDP-11s and then into the world of PCs as well, and PC networking. And I was fortunate enough to be around at the time when computers were just replacing typewriters in the workplace. So one of my very first jobs was installing networks. We used what's it called, Novell netware. And we're putting in IBM Type 1 cables all over the place and replacing typewriters and putting 286 and 386 computers on people's desks with word processors so that they could lose all their work much more easily. And it just sort of went from there, really. And I love computer technology. I love all sorts of technology. I love old technology as well. And anybody who visits our website will see that I'm interested in all sorts of old stuff too. Not exactly sure how I got into the world of video, really, but my grandfather was a keen filmmaker, and I think it kind of came from there. And I was just, in fact, my my boss at that first job I had, where I was the network manager, wanted us to explore video capture cards and that kind of thing. And I think that's probably where it started. The two came together, and suddenly I thought, I can do something creative with a computer rather than fixing them and installing them all the time. So I guess that's a potted history, Michael. And yeah, where'd you go from there?
And so, okay, it's a bit of a similar background, similar timing at least. We're all of a certain age, you know. How do you fill your days now?
Well, I sort of retired from working for companies a number of years ago, and I set up doing my own business with doing computer support and that kind of thing, something just to sort of keep ticking over. And I started getting into the video editing side of things as the technology improved. I started off with Matrox made a thing called the Rainbow Runner, and I remember installing it in my brand new 200 megahertz Pentium 1 with 1 meg of RAM or whatever that we had in those days, and it crashing every 5 minutes. But I got the bug, and I just took the opportunity to do video work whenever I could, and slowly built it up over the years. So that's probably 25 years now, I would guess, something like that, since I started doing that. And I've just continued to do that and continued to enjoy old stuff. And now those two things are coming together. We're starting to make films about old Land Rovers and tractors and old computers even, you know, are some of the things to come. So, yeah, when we saw your post on Facebook to do Comic-Con, thought, yeah, could do that.
Yeah, because Dan Jenkins had reached out and said, do you know anybody? And I said, well, I don't know anybody specifically, but I know this group of people, and there's probably going to be someone in there who'll step up, and there might even be somebody local. Because at first the idea was flying somebody over from the U.S. Well, that was all kinds of cost and complexity, especially if you wouldn't be bringing equipment and such. I thought, oh, there'll be somebody over there who can take care of you. And I'm glad the gig went well. Now, we'll bring these other fine gentlemen into it. The gig apparently did go quite well, did it not, fine sirs?
It did indeed. And I was particularly impressed by Giles and his cohort Martin's ability to adapt and overcome every single technical challenge that we managed to throw at them. So wouldn't it be great if we could bring in Callum live from Glasgow? And we did that. And let's throw in a Chromecast behind the scenes so we can broadcast from an Android handset and all that kind of stuff. And Giles, you just did it rather than just doing the normal AV thing of saying, no, can't be done. So thank you for that.
Not a problem, sir.
So what did you end up having deployed there? What was the profile of the project? I mean, Dan and I didn't discuss it in any detail because I wasn't able to attend. So what ended up being the works?
I take you're addressing that to me.
Yeah.
Can I just thank you, by the way, for making that connection? I don't think I've ever actually thanked you, Michael, for introducing us to Dan. That was a very good introduction. Yeah, so Dan wanted to try and make it as slick as we could. So we had 4 vMix systems running, one on each of the projection screens so we could manage the content of the screens. We had videos rolling out between the presentations so that it wasn't just a blue screen there, which Dan particularly didn't want to have, which meant we could have the sponsors' messages appearing while there was nothing else happening. And then we could just nicely fade over to the presenters' laptops. We used NDI technology to bring the laptops. Sorry, I've got emails coming in. I should have turned the sound off on that one. We used NDI technology to bring the laptops in. There's a NDI piece of software that can capture the desktop, but we actually plug these things in, which are a piece of hardware to take the HDMI in from the laptop, and it comes out as gigabit NDI, which worked for most machines. 1 or 2 Macs. There were 2 Macs, I think, that didn't like the, well, this didn't like the Mac
Pros. The newer MacBook Pros are desperately bad machines.
I think they output HDCP, and this, I think, probably respects the HDCP. And I did think afterwards I could have got around that, but we just put the software on there, and that worked fine. But the NDI desktop capture software on the Mac seems to capture the microphone. So when we switched to the one of the presenters' machines, there was suddenly this massive howling feedback, and it was coming through the actual computer. But yeah, other than that. So the cameras were connected in the WebRTC room with this technology as well. And we used SDI, sort of standard SDI in the VoIP track. So there were 2 slightly different technologies going on, but it was all set up in a similar way. And it just meant that we could control everything. So the machines that we had at the back of the rooms, which are the other 2 vMix systems, enabled us to switch from one camera to another, roll out the intro clips at the beginning and the tail clips at the end of the presentation, so it was all nicely finished. And we live streamed those, so you could, probably less than 12 seconds delay, you could see it sort of almost live. Which I think some people were doing. I gather some people were actually watching the WebRTC room from the VoIP room and vice versa. So that was quite fun.
Well, I was certainly sitting here in Texas and watching. I don't know that I knew you could see the 2 rooms, but I was watching most of the things. I didn't get up at like 4 in the morning, but it was, and the quality was very good. And of course, being remote, the latency was not obvious to me. Somebody's upset. I'm hearing a beep. Anyhow, we'll ignore that. I noticed that you had quite a lot of microphones because you had some panel discussions going on, and everybody was mic'd up, which kudos to you, because so many times you see somebody passing a handheld microphone from person to person, and it's a little bit awkward. How are you dealing with all of that? Were you bringing them like back into something, and they had to have some substantial audio capability, I'm gathering?
Well, they were standard sort of Sennheiser wireless mic packs connected to little headsets that you could barely see, which was something Dan specified. He specifically didn't want the bulky headset microphone and things, and it was a good call. That it looked really good, I thought. So each person had a headset and a wireless transmitter. We had radio receivers at the back of the room, so that we could bring the audio into our mixing desk, and that way we could combine it all and get all the levels sort of fairly similar, and generally enable you to hear everybody clearly. We could have done the mic passing thing. I mean, that's kind of what you would sort of think to do probably first, but Dan was just keen to make sure that it was a level above that, or really, you know, as good as we could do, because he just wanted it to look right. And I think that we achieved that between us with his sort of specifications and what we were able to do for him.
Well, he had the advantage of... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Those of you who follow somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk maybe know this already, but when you want to do something, you need to get people who are passionate about it. And we were all at Camellia World in Berlin, for example, the month before, and they have an outfit too. It's the same exact idea. These are people who actually care about what they're doing. Comparing it to many US shows I've been to, where basically people are like acting like civil servants. They're there, they got to do it. And any demand that you bring to them is like, oh, well, you know, we don't have those cables, blah, blah, blah. And in the case, I think it's Pascom. Is that the right name, James, for the folks? Yeah. And Giles and Martin, you would never be too shy to go up and say, do you have a cable to do can we do this thing? Because that's what they do. That's what they wanted to do. And it's super important to find people who are passionate about what they're doing. That applies to everything you ever do in life, like the VUC, but mainly it applies when you're like spending money, trying to have people to do things for you. They need to want to be able to go up. Yes, Michael. With regard to IRC, I won't repeat that, but you need to have people who are interested in what they're doing, who are invested. And you'll always get good results with that. That was my interjection. And by the way, Dan Jenkins is listening, and he obviously appreciates how this all went down too. Great job, Dan, by the way, because he, after all, had the Desiderata, and that helps too, because if somebody calls Giles and says, yeah, we're doing a video thing, and has no other details, kind of wide open. So you need that too.
Sure. Yeah. And Dan has done enough speaking gigs at other people's conferences to kind of know what all the problems are. And even just getting somebody mic'd up, reasonably before they're supposed to be speaking is sometimes quite difficult. But we try to do what we can in all these circumstances. So you have a gig coming up shortly, right? You have this, well, I'm not sure I'm going to get the name right, but it's the StreamCon or World of, what is this thing?
Streamfest Live, yeah, I think is what you're thinking of, on the 4th of August. We did it last year on the 5th of August. Basically, we try and get a number of people from all around the world to come and speak about anything to do with live streaming, but we do it online and live streamed so that you can join in from wherever you happen to be in the world. It's completely free. We have sponsors this year. We didn't do sponsors last year, but this year we have some excellent sponsors, and we're aiming to do about 12 hours continuous, and about halfway through we're going to hand off the production from the UK over to the USA, so that the long-term idea being that if we can do a 24-hour one, we can perhaps have 3 or 4 different productions all around the world, and you'll produce it for 6 hours and then move on to the next one, or however long. And yeah, the subjects are very varied. There's such a lot going on in the world of live streaming, as it were. So many different applications that enable you to do all sorts of whiz-bang things, that you just can't possibly know about them all. But you get a taster, hopefully, if you watch Streamfest Live, of what's out there and how it works. And it's a fun thing just to hang out and be part of and chat with people who join in. One of the significant things, and the biggest difference between what we do and a conference like ComCon, for example, ComCon is great because you get to actually meet people and talk to people, and you make new contacts and things like that. So to try and enable some of that within the online world, what we do is to use a thing called Zoom, which is a video conferencing platform, which I believe is WebRTC based. And basically all the audience come in there. So it is possible for people to actually talk to each other, and you can go into breakout rooms and take people away and stuff like that if you want to as well. So it's possible to have little meetings and groups to get together and things like that. But they can also interact with the speaker. So questions can be asked and that kind of thing. And it's all visible live on YouTube or wherever we have to fall back to if YouTube breaks.
Now that's an interesting thing, because that's sort of more akin to what our history is. We've been using Hangouts since, I think, before Hangouts were publicly available, and Zoom is really just sort of a commercial alternative to Hangouts. In point of fact, the folks behind Zoom actually funded some development in a service called Jitsi that we were also very early adopters of, and they've gone on to be bought by Atlassian, and they're now becoming an empire unto themselves. It's really interesting how all this stuff, because when you talk about streaming video, that's kind of one thing, and people think about YouTube, and it's mostly a one-way kind of a thing. But the minute you engage a Zoom or a Hangout, now it's more like a radio call-in show with picture support. And now a talking head like me, maybe you don't need great video. But it's nice to be able to do all the tricks like your green screen background. And is that Martin's? That's Martin's color wash generator behind you, NDI color generator.
Yes, yes, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. I've been yakking about NDI to these guys since it first launched and trying to get other companies to uptake it. For example, there's a company coming out with a camera. It's in early production now. The company's name is Sub2R. It's a 4K webcam, but it's an industrial kind of very high quality webcam with these lovely little changeable I/O modules. You can put gigabit Ethernet on it. It's got USB 3.1C. You can put a fiber interface on it, and it's got changeable lenses. And one of the things that I've convinced them to do is implement NDI right inside the camera. So you put gigabit on it, you can send 4K down the wire, and away it goes. It's about $700 to the early adopters, but still, that's not that bad. You've probably paid a lot more for cameras, I'm betting, just looking at what you have in the studio there.
It's, yeah, you obviously can pay a lot for a camera. That sounds really absolutely fantastic. I'm not aware of any cameras that do full NDI built in. There's the NDI HX, the high efficiency H.264 thing, but I've not seen any that do full NDI, as it were, like the Bird Dog devices do. So yeah, I should be watching that with interest. I think Randy actually did give me the link for that at ComCon. I've got it on my phone, but I'm sorry, I've not read it. But I really must go and have a look at that. That sounds very, very interesting.
Well, I think we've interviewed them 3 or 4 times. They've been delayed in getting their camera out for a variety of reasons, but it's this lovely little modular camera where you can get different sensors. You can get a 720p sensor or a 1080 sensor or a 4K sensor and swap them out. Anyhow, it's lovely bit of technology. What else are we doing?
I wanted to ask Giles, but I don't know, this might be indiscreet, but you actually were showing us a full view of the studio zoomed back. Is it possible to show that view again? I think people might like to see it, if you don't mind. There we go. Look at this.
Yeah, so there you go. It's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, you could even describe it a little bit if you feel like it.
Okay, well, obviously behind me is a green screen. It's lit up by a couple of reflecting lights here. It's important to try and get a bit of light behind you, not cast shadows. It's not quite perfect, as you can see. If I put my hands out in the right places, you can see a bit of shadow there. In front of me, I've got a number of... I don't normally have this many computers on the table, but I've got an NDI view of the vMix multi-view going on the monitor on this laptop to my left, so I can see all my cameras. There's sort of the preview and program window, and then 8 cameras visible down there. Behind it, there's another one which is monitoring YouTube normally. This one over here is an NDI feed of what I'm actually sending out to you. And I'm running some email on here at the moment, but normally I'd be running Zoom on this machine as well as the production machine, which you can see over towards the bottom left of the picture there. So from here I can kind of control what's going on in the Zoom room, as we call it, which I wouldn't be able to do otherwise because it's actually running on the machine over there for the production. So on those red shelves there's a fairly beefy computer with vMix on it. You can see Randy there on the bottom left screen. He's the current view that I'm seeing. I'm
looking at the latency too, and it's really not much, actually.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, the camera actually this camera you're looking at the moment is an IP camera, and it has about 150 milliseconds of latency. It's just an IP security camera. This camera is actually coming through a Bird Dog, and this has got 1 frame of latency. And they're going to be reducing that, apparently. I was talking to the guys there the other day. So the latency really is going to be very, very low on these things. So, yeah, it gives you a rough idea. Anyway, the camera's actually quite an old one. It's that one's a Sony Z1. and it doesn't even have HDMI. It's pre-HDMI technology, and so I had to cobble all sorts of things together to convert it to bring it in. Couple of softbox lights there, and microphone. I got an AKG, I think it is. I can't remember the model number, but that's a condenser mic that we're using for the audio this evening, which I think sounds quite good. It is picking up the room a bit. I did notice that earlier, but I think it's reflecting off this hard surface here. I think if I put a soft cloth on top of here, it would probably deaden that a bit. Yeah, it wasn't built to do live streaming in the studio. I'm in the corner of an agricultural shed. And we just built it to be able to do some green screen stuff to record originally, and that's another interesting thing. Again, sorry, we'll just say this though while I'm here. When I first picked up vMix, I didn't actually intend to use it for live streaming. I wanted to record live, produce live, so that there wasn't so much editing afterwards. Because I mean, you can spend 10 times as much time editing as you can actually producing it. So that was how we kind of started with this, and we started recording stuff. And then we mentioned Tom Sinclair earlier, the streaming idiot, and he kind of got me into it because I watched his show and I thought, this is quite fun. I actually quite like the idea of having a go at this, but I never intended to sit in front of a camera, and I was a nervous wreck when I first started doing this. But it's been great fun. We've been going pretty well 2 years, I think, streaming a show every week. So it's been a real blast, and it's holding my interest. There's never a dull moment doing this.
Yeah. And what's excellent is that you've got the URL is when you're speaking is on. James Bodie, are you listening? Because I think you need to introduce the person you're speaking to.
Yes. Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Here,
what are you up to?
Again. So I was here at Waitrose, just participating, and who should rock up but my niece and nephew. So this is Annie Ann, my brother's daughter.
Hello.
And Luke, my nephew. So there we are. Just to prove that it is a very small world. I can't go anywhere without being recognised.
And what are those herbs behind you?
Herbs. Oh, they're flowers.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right. We
wanted to know what was going on, and the question from Annie Ann is Giles wearing Andy Pandy?
I never said that. I said I need the yellow top, actually.
So anyway.
I'm rocking it's my Minions look.
I love it.
Yeah, very colourful. But Giles, tell us, what is the story behind the Andy Pandy jumpsuit thing?
The overalls. I don't know. Where do I start with that, really? They're just comfortable. I like them, and I practically live in overalls. So, I have a few different pairs, and they're... Yeah, and actually... when you start bending over and plugging cables in and stuff like that, if you're wearing regular trousers, there can be the slightly unfortunate exposure problem. So this solves all of that.
So there is no butt crack with that wrist.
That's it. Yes.
Basically, you're not a plumber.
Yeah, wonderful.
Quite so.
I think that Giles, I think that's kind of your signature look too, because it seems to me that we had a long talk in the pub. Wasn't that where I had a chance to talk to you? Was in that pub, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And at that point, I think you were pretty much dressed the same as you were the whole time, which is in that comfortable outfit. So that's great.
That's my natural habitat, the pub.
Makes sense. That wasn't actually much of a pub as far as I'm concerned. That was more of a restaurant with a bar, but they were very nice in there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you who else were very nice, and that's the rest of your team. So tell us a little bit more about your community interest company and your team. Where do you get them from, and how do you work together, and why are you a community interest company?
Okay, when we started making films about historic things. My other two colleagues who you haven't met yet, who are Diana and Claire, who are the other two directors in the company, we just thought it would be good to sort of have a formal structure around the company, and therefore it would be good to set up a sort of limited company. We looked into it and decided that the community interest company kind of fitted our sort of ethos on the whole thing. Really, we weren't sort of doing it to try and make masses of money or anything, and in fact we wanted to do commercial jobs to enable us to then go and do some of these other things which just aren't at all commercial, but we just felt they should be done. Some of the things that we've been able to video may not exist for much longer, and things like that, and it's just important to create a record of those. The guys you met at ComCon is another company who I work with, and we contracted Martin and his guys in because we needed the extra cameras and things, and so we've done quite a bit of work with Martin. It's been most interesting actually getting involved in some of the things he does, and vice versa. And maybe next time you'll meet a different crew. Who knows? It just depends who's available on the day and that kind of thing.
So, to take a technological bent, how much has it changed your world to be able to put video across the network rather than coaxial cables?
It's changed it a lot. I mean, the coaxial SDI is very, very good. You can go a long way with that. But I guess you can probably go an unlimited distance, but you need a cable for every camera. Using NDI, you can get 8 cameras on one cable, and you can actually, for going between switches at least, and if you run a PoE switch, the 8 cables that run from that switch will power the bird dogs or cameras or whatever. These are running on PoE at the moment, and the IP camera that I was showing you earlier, that view, he's a PoE camera as well. So it is a pretty big game changer. The other thing is it's a sort of standard for shifting all sorts of traffic. So it's not just that you can put video over it, you can send data or whatever you need to send over that link. We can do our comms over the same link. It's one wire, and that is a significant improvement when you come to set things up. Less wires around for people to trip over, and just a lot less deployment, and more in the software, which is I like personally.
Yeah, less cost in hardware terms, oftentimes, but tremendous flexibility. I think I spent 25 years in video production and broadcasting before moving off into the telecom space, and I think it's transformative in ways that traditional manufacturers kind of didn't get at first, and they're only just now getting it. But this live streaming stuff is sort of a different business entirely. If you're talking, over here in the US, we talk about call letter networks and stations and stuff, and they still do everything over BNC and have giant routers, and where a router is a half a rack of equipment, not a little IP router. So it's all very interesting. Going forward, we'll be not replicating what you did, but there's an event coming up in 2 weeks called ClueCon in Chicago, where in this particular case, I'm going to travel up there and do this sort of thing on a smaller scale. They don't have the 2 tracks, but because they had an existing circumstance where they're servicing projectors, and they had been using some little Canon cameras to do that, scattered through the room. We're replacing those with cameras that we rented from Tom Sinclair, some of these PTZ optics cameras, so that the projector support can be one workflow over SDI, and then I'll pick up the video over the network, and we'll do the live streaming that way. So we have sort of parallel workflows going on, kind of similar to what you did. but it'll be just me. It won't be a team.
It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. But yeah, I know you will pull that one off, Michael. That'd be no problem. It's it's getting the cameras and everything just in place, isn't it? And then you can move them around a bit but there's an awful lot going on. I mean, anybody who's done this kind of live streaming where you produce your own show, as it were, there's a lot to think about, isn't there? There's more to it than it kind of meets the eye, but once you kind of get into it and you get used to the way of doing things, it's much easier to produce something that you're not in yourself, I have to say.
Yeah. In my past life, what I used to do was install and train people in the use of equipment in control rooms, and sometimes in OB vehicles. So we go out to a basketball game, and I'd be showing the graphics operators in the OB truck how to do their thing and insert all of that. But there, you had a team of 40 or 50 to do a basketball game or to do a newscast. Whereas in this world, it's now 3. You got a good crew.
Absolutely.
Can I interject again? That I was looking at the creation date of 12seconds.tv, which I don't know if anybody remembers, because back in the day, the same time that you could download a movie trailer and it took 20 minutes for a 1-minute movie trailer, and it was postage stamp time size. That was a few decades ago. In 2008, this site, 12seconds.tv, came and went, and basically it was like Vine. You uploaded 12 seconds. But what is interesting to me is that I believe Google, what we're doing right now, began Hangouts on Air streaming, began maybe something like 6 years ago, I think. And before that, say 10 years ago, if you wanted relatives to watch a wedding in Australia, it would be very costly and maybe even impossible. Whereas today, when we were at ComCon, when they were playing the game out on the lawn, I can never remember the name of it, Jamba, whatever that is.
Jenga,
yeah. I wanted to film it. And I said, well, why film it why don't I just put it on YouTube Live? Point is, every phone now has multiple apps that you can do this on. I'm not saying that it's great. It's still an accomplishment, particularly in the audio. Michael and I have discussed this often, that there's a million videos, how many? Maybe 1 billion videos on YouTube, but 99% of them have horrible audio. So that's a whole other thing. When you are streaming live, if you've got a microphone that's going to work and an audio that's going to work, that's a huge other thing. It's just amazing to me that the progress that has been made in, say, the last decade. It's incredible. And I think that you've lived that, Giles, and Michael certainly has lived it. And it's amazing, because we were so primitive, and now, first of all, anyone can do this on a phone. And second of all, you could actually do a great job with a studio for much less than you or I have invested, or any of us. I mean, a person could get in this for almost nothing. So it's great.
Here's the advantage, though. The thing that I think that the ComCon experience and various other experiences points out, it's a little like desktop publishing, which is always a parallel I come back to. Production of streaming video has been democratized by the ready available of more affordable technology. So anybody can theoretically do it, but only a subset of those people are going to do it well. And it's nice to see people out there in the, not extremely well-funded space, actually doing a really good job and having happy customers, as came out of ComCon. I think that's, and I look at guys like Tom Sinclair as promoting that and building that space. And I know there are so many people doing high school sports or services from local churches and things like that. And that he's really built that community very, very well, and kudos to him. I did appear on his show one time, and it was a sort of a last-minute thing. And I felt a bit out of place, in fact, because I come from a slightly different space, and it was sort of, everybody was doing high school sports. And being Canadian, I have no interest in high school sports. you get into any sporting events? Do you engage in any of that, Giles?
No, I'm not particularly into sports, but we don't. No, that's not our thing. But yeah, lots of people do. You've probably come across Jim Jacobs and people like that. The Friday Night Network. He does high school football. There's a lot of interest in doing that kind of thing, and I think it requires quite a special setup, really, to get your cameras out far enough away from where you're producing. To get the angles that you need, and then you've got to have guys on the cameras who can track what's going on, and yeah, it's a if you'll excuse the pun, and a whole different ball game really to what we currently do. I'd like to sort of get into it a bit. Rugby would be probably what I would be interested in doing, but we're not really in a position to be able to do that at the moment, but maybe it's something we'll look into in the future. I think in the UK here, we're not as advanced as people in the US in terms of wanting to see all this stuff online. I think it's beginning to happen, but I think we're always a few years behind in that respect.
That's a good point. I have a question about multicam, meaning, I mean, you do multicam. What I mean by multicam is the YouTube possibility of injecting from different locations. I'm not even sure why you'd want to do this other than sports, and you've kind of eliminated sports from your interest, but have you done anything like that where you're injecting from, in other words, where the viewer has a choice of cameras? I'm expressing myself poorly because I can't remember what YouTube calls this, but they, among other people, allow a choice of cameras from the viewer standpoint. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's called multi-camera, isn't it? We've thought about using it. Somebody invited me to go to an event where they wanted to do multiple languages, and that was one possible solution, was to run English on one channel and Spanish on another, and so on. And vMix has made that possible now. You can stream out you can stream out 3 different streams with different audio on, and we're looking at Martin Sinclair, that is, who's the creator of vMix, has said on his forums, would anybody have a use case for being able to do different video streams as well? And we sort of said, well, yes, because something like ComCon, you could stream the presenter view, and you could then stream on a second channel the slides, the presentation. And if they've got a camera up on the stage so that they can show you something physical they got on the stage, that could be on a third channel, and then the viewer would have that choice to change between them. So I think it's got a lot of potential, but I've not actually done it yet.
And I think Michael and I tried it, did a 30-second test just to see if it works, and it does, but we never actually found much of a use for it. It's fascinating. The different languages thing is pretty compelling.
Now, I should say we are interconnected here to my employer's telephone conference bridge. And one of the things that we do at ZipDX, that company, is we enable simultaneous interpretation over the phone, which means you could have an interpreter. Say you were doing an English-Russian football game. You could have an interpreter interpreting the Russian announcer into English, so that you would be getting a different perspective if you had a Russian announcer, or vice versa. Or if you had maybe a German audience, you might have an interpreter interpreting into German for the German audience or whatnot. But where we typically do this stuff is more about meetings, UN style, where you have international organizations, works councils, and things like that. Everybody has to engage in their own language. We are anomalous here at the UC because for almost our entire existence, we've tied up a conference bridge. Even before we were doing video, we were doing it by telephone, and then we added video later on. It's kind of weird. Yeah.
Giles, had you done any audio podcasting before video? Or you? And by the way, are you a ham radio operator, as is James and several of us?
Yes, I'm an amateur radio operator as well.
I knew it.
No, I wasn't interested in audio really. A few years ago, and it's got to be 10 years ago now, a friend and I used to work with a chap called Paul in the village here, and sadly he died when he was 49, which was rather a shock. He also was an amateur radio operator, and we were talking about doing videos for the internet, and he said, well, let's do audio first because it's easier, you just concentrate on the one bit. And I said, yeah, okay. And we sort of started to do a few things, and then he unfortunately died, and that was the end of that. So no, my first foray into this was video full on.
And that's what's happening today. By the way, this is a funny thing. Podcasts, every year you see, hi, podcasts are going to be big this year, blah, blah, blah. They're catching on. And it just happens that we got a flyer from Nespresso, right? A Nestle company, Nespresso coffee. There's an espresso podcast now. And I think I find that significant. It's probably audio, but my point is that I find that significant that a company like that is getting into podcasting, because I've always thought that things like dog foods, cat foods, pet foods, anything that has a really high general appeal, would be great material for podcasting. Whereas there are a zillion tech podcasts already. If you're going to have a company, that would be something interesting. And I think that eventually, if they're not already, they will get into video, because video is the thing now, right? So it's a good thing that you're doing that.
I think that's right. I think there's a great opportunity to use the streaming technology as a marketing tool. And, you can imagine, back in the early days when television started up, and the advertising on there was sort of quite informational, as well as trying to sell you the product. And I believe that's the way this technology could be used if you want to sort of use it to market a product, give people information, tell them about it, understand what it is that they're trying to sell you. And you can do it for a fraction of the cost that you can on the traditional broadcast media.
Absolutely. Let's so open it up and make sure that James, who has a still photo now, if he's still around, or
Yeah.
Andy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Further comments from you or your extended family?
No, I'm still doing a family interview here. And Anna said, oh, I'm not on YouTube, am I? And the answer is yes.
Yes, she will be. Well, she is now live.
Yes, you're live, Anna.
You are live.
Oh. Exciting stuff. This is the power of live streaming, isn't it? This is what it's all about. Nobody's safe, not even just outside Waitrose in Lutterworth in Leicestershire.
Excellent. Andy, do you have any comments? You're unmuted, but you're still muted.
Oh, they've got this local mute thing. It's a button. It works, Oh, good grief. I'm afraid I had to go and do something else, so I've missed most of that. But it's not an area that particularly interests me, shall we say, the video and the sound of it. I appreciate the skill and dedication of everyone involved, and I am very thankful for people like Giles and Michael around who know what they're talking about. But I'm very happy to leave it that way.
There you go. All right, anybody in IRC also? We have a vibrant crowd, as always. Oh, James, look, he wants to say something.
No, I'm just saying I'm back. Sorry about the interspersion of the family business.
No, that's excellent.
But when your family turn up out of the blue, and it's birthday day today as well, so I'd say happy birthday and all the rest of it.
That's excellent.
Are you impressed by my family?
Absolutely. I think they're wonderful and
very well presented.
Yes, and well-mannered and kind. Let's get back to our guest, Giles. Giles, I would like to find out if you have any visions for the future. Obviously, technology is going to go further and further, and you're going to, like the rest of us here, buy or obtain, buy, beg, or steal the latest stuff. But UCD Visions, I mentioned multicam, but there's also 360 degrees. Again, at ComCon, for example, 360 degrees actually would have added a little humor, maybe, but not a huge advantage otherwise. But are there things that you think are going to make a difference, particularly in what you're doing?
The idea of a 360 cam in the conference rooms is quite an interesting one, actually, just because as the viewer, you'd be able to just sort of look around the room and see if anybody's paying attention.
Right,
which
they can watch you work too.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I'd want to be caught on that, but yeah, I don't know. 360 has an interest, but I've not really kind of put my finger on how I would use that yet. I don't think it kind of fits in with the kind of things that I currently do. But it definitely has its uses, and I'm sure people are going to come up with some really good uses for it. And when they do, I'll be interested to see exactly how it does get used.
So, what about live broadcasts? With the advances in communications now, you can get a nice fat pipe, and then devices like this with high definition cameras and the ability to process the video. All of a sudden, it opens up a whole raft of different possibilities with live broadcasts from out in the field, bringing people together, just as I am at the moment, sitting just outside in the gardening department at Waitrose in Lutterworth.
It's fantastic, isn't it? That such a small piece of technology as a phone can actually do that. I mean, we really have made massive progress over the last few years, and it's just great that you can sit there and be part of this. And yeah, I think the thing about live is that if something happens, I mean, particularly in the news world, maybe it's going to be possible to have coverage of things that have just sort of occurred, disasters or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be disasters. Why do I think of disasters? But can be fun stuff. Yeah, where it would just have been far too expensive to try and do that before, or there wouldn't have been the bandwidth available. But as you say now, I mean, I'm talking to you over a 4G network because our landline here is just so slow that I can't use it for video. So, but I can go anywhere with that router and just turn my computer on and set up and start broadcasting anywhere where there's a 4G signal. And I'm sure you could provide me with one, James.
Well, it's funny you should say that, but yeah, I think we ought to set you up with your own cell, local. Well, probably not at your house, but somewhere close to you, so you can have unlimited, super fast, ultra fast 4G, 5G signal.
You remember Justin TV, which was, I think, the first occurrence of these things. Michael, you remember all that stuff where they had like multiple SIM, connections. Yeah. In fact, that was back in the day where it wasn't LTE, by the way. What was that?
It was, it was 3G,
3G
HSPA.
Plus. Yeah,
HSPA at the time.
But it's amazing how the bandwidths have increased. So I can sit here on old 4G, I can get a good steady, 30, 40, 50 megabits per second. Yeah. So,
by the way,
Giles, I wanted to ask you, I mean, isn't it a little bit expensive doing a lot of video over 4G? Where do you get your SIM cards from? Where do you get your service from? It must cost you a fortune.
On my phone, I'm using 3, and I get unlimited broadband for £25 a month, something like that.
Oh, you've got one of the old legacy plans, have you?
Yeah,
because they don't do unlimited anymore now that they've gone to 4G, because you can get so much data through on an unlimited plan. They've stopped doing it. But so a bit of advice: hang on to that with everything you've got. Don't ever lose that.
No, well, unfortunately, it's only 30 gigs tethering, but it doesn't always recognise that certain applications are tethering, so it doesn't always count everything.
Well, I can show you how to get around that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Giles, how much you use a month, because I know that of course, I avoid. I have a very cheap plan. I just upgraded it because I'm going to the States and I want to use roaming. But the point is, Currently, I have 30 gigs. When I was with Free, not 3, but Free, it was unlimited LTE. It's certainly well up to in the 100 gigs, but I used maybe 800 megs, so I didn't care. What kind of data would you be using each month? Sorry, because you do a lot of, if you do a lot of video, a lot of the kind of things you're doing now, it must be considerable.
Well, yeah, I regularly chew through 30 gig a month on 4G. My 4G router would. You have to remember, we've got no 4G signal here, so I've got a 4G router up in the loft in a barn with a beam antenna on it, and I get a small signal, and I get about five megabits up, something like that, which enables me to do our show from here every week. When we do Streamfest Live, we go to Iddesleigh, which is up the road, and from there I get the maximum speed, which I think is about 50 megabits up, and it's phenomenal. It works really well. But of course, the higher the data rate, the quicker you get through your data, and we chewed through, I think, about 48 gigs in a day on Streamfest Live last year. So yeah.
Well, if you've got an unlimited tariff, then that's okay, and I'll show you how to manipulate your APN settings so that it thinks that you're not hotspotting.
Right. Okay. I'd be interested to know about that. The other one is actually on a 32 gig data sim, because you could only get free on a handset. So that one is limited to 32 gigs, but it's 30 quid a month with EE, and it works. So yeah, between the two of them, I can juggle the data around. If I'm in a strong signal area, I'll just use my phone. But if I need the router to drag the signals in from a weak tower somewhere, then I'll use that one.
Can I just finish by making sure that someone from VUC can come in on August 4th and participate in the event that Giles was talking about? We are flying out at an ungodly hour of the morning, August 5th. So unless they, what time does the event start?
Giles, can you just say again where,
give us the details.
When it is, and where we can find further details?
Okay. We have a website for Streamfest, which is streamfestlive.com, all as one, streamfestlive.com. It will be streamed on YouTube. If you go to the stepbackintime.tv channel or the streamfestlive.com website, you will find the live stream, and it starts at 10 a.m. UK time on August the 4th.
I may be able to make it. Let's all jump on that, though. Everybody within earshot, okay?
Streamfestlive.com.
Right.
That's the one.
10 a.m. UK time is a little early for me.
But, not for me.
But later in the day.
Well, I can't remember what time it finishes, but the schedule, I think it finishes at something like 2 or 3 in the mornings, UK time. So everybody around the world should have the opportunity to tune in and see some of it at a half sensible time of the day.
And you'll be able to have correspondents from overseas coming in and joining you as remotes, won't you?
Yeah, that's right. So we're using vMix Call to bring in our presenters. That's the WebRTC-based technology that we used at ComCon to bring in your guests. And we're using Zoom for the audience members so that you have that full feel of a conference, but all online, all virtual.
So I need to get Zim if I wanted to say hello?
Yes, you will.
Zoom. Sorry.
Yeah, you will, but you can just click on the link on the page and it'll download it and install it for you. So it's very, very easy to get in. You don't sort of have to sign up for it or anything.
All right. I encourage everybody to take part. And I'm going to shut up now and let anybody else who has any final things to say or to ask Giles, and then Giles can make his final arguments before we make our decision on his fate. No, I'm kidding. But we'll be doing that on August. I will. Well, if you're starting in the morning, that would be something like 12 noon here. Perfect. Anybody else? Comments? Andy, James, Michael, or anyone in IRC.
Yeah, I'm just thinking Michael can do something like sun up over in Texas live or something like that.
Actually, it's a lovely day here now. You can't really see too much through the trees, but it's a lovely day now.
Nice.
So
Now
we've
you're
got
just showing
some,
off, Michael.
well, just as Giles does. The only difference is
yard.
I don't have cameras looking at my sort of from inside. We just have a few cameras that do routine surveillance that I pick up in vMix
So,
just to have
well, what
signals.
about the hummingbirds? Have they all pushed off?
Well, I have recorded video of the hummingbirds, but
Yeah, but you could kid people that it's live, couldn't you?
yeah. Let's see.
Yeah,
Hang on, here they are.
Yeah,
Pretend it's
hummingbirds in the back garden.
Here you go,
Really
hummingbirds.
exciting.
I
Oh,
took
that's
some,
nice.
I took some. Well, this was a Canon
Watching
70D parked on a tripod in front of a hummingbird feeder.
Come on. Vibrate your wings.
You know, this is where I would really like to have, some people want fast action for replay. I would like to have it so I could catch the hummingbirds and slow them down.
Yeah, that's beautiful, though. I love those things, yeah.
I will say...
there he goes.
There he goes.
There he goes. There he goes. I did the... I did the vMix upgrade just yesterday to 4K. So now I can do more than one vMix call. But how many? I think I can do 2 now. And you have to go to the Pro version to be able to do more than that. How many have you done, Giles?
It's 2 and 8. We did 8 on the Pro version when it first came out. We actually found some bugs, which Martin fixed immediately when we told him about them. So yeah, there is an episode of the World of Live Streaming. I didn't have the bandwidth for it here, but Jon over in Sweden hosted the show that evening, and we all vMix called into him, and that was pretty impressive, really, to see that working.
Yeah,
it's impressive when you can change your configuration depending on who has the bandwidth that week. I think that's really neat.
Well, and one of the things I've been meaning to do is put an instance of vMix or something like that, just as we've done with Jitsi. Put it up on a VM somewhere that has access to NVIDIA hardware for encoding, and then so you can be bandwidth independent, right? Because you get to be sort of just your connection to the central bit and use the server's bandwidth, which is cheap and cheerful. So that's
why we like Zoom. That's why we like Zoom, because it's effectively one call, but you can have 100 people on it. But the bandwidth you're using is only your bandwidth up and whoever's currently speaking coming down, and that is a major benefit of it. That's why we don't use vMix call when I'm hosting the show. Just I can't find enough bandwidth to do that. But vMix call is absolutely brilliant, and it definitely has its uses, and it's very easy. That's the great thing. vMix call, you just bung it in, all the mix minus is done for you. So yeah, and off you go. vMix is a superb product. If you've never had a look at it, I definitely recommend having a look at it.
As a
I will, as soon as they have a Mac version.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think we need to tie this up, and of course, Giles, you're welcome to stay, and we can do in a mature audiences only version. Which we continue. Generally, no, we party on, and the people on ZipDX generally stay on unless we get into something crazy. But we are over the hour, so unless anybody else has any further business, anyone? Incidentally,
Can I just say thank you for having me on.
We're really pleased to have you, Giles. And Dan Jenkins says he's neither confirming nor denying that there will be a ComCon UK next year. But
I hope there is.
Well,
he is asking if you're up for 4K.
Yeah, we're not going to let him get away with not having one next year. So the demand is enormous. So we will be having a ComCon.
Let's hope that happens. In the meantime, I say to you all, go forth and multiply.